My research topic is about Moroccan English department students' attitudes towards the use of distance education during COVID-19. And I took the case of Moulay Ismail University. So my name is Mohammed Ben Hima. I am a high school teacher and researcher in the Discourse, Creativity and Society Laboratory at Sidi Mohammed Ben Abdallah University in Fez, Morocco. I have many publications on teacher education and students' intercultural communicative competence, ESP, and translation. So some of my research articles are published in newspapers as well as journals. So to start with, the research outline that I'm going to follow is as follows. So I'm going to start with an introduction, followed by review of the literature, methodology, research findings, and I'm going to combine research findings and discussion and conclusion as well as references. So the structure is an emirate structure. In Morocco, distance education has been adopted since the National Charter of Education and Training in 1999. So this is a reform. And since then, many attempts have been made in terms of logistics and implementation. So it has been like 2 decades now that distance education has been adopted in Morocco. However, the surge of COVID-19 cases in Morocco, especially in the beginning of March, has forced the Moroccan Ministry of Education to officially adopt distance education as the only mode of learning and teaching. For the review of the literature, in fact, I'm going to start with definitions of some key terms. So for distance education, it means teaching, learning where teachers and students are distant from each other, so from the world, because there are many confusing words in the literature like e-learning and digital education and so on and so forth. So it means that students and teachers distant. And it can be synchronous or asynchronous, that is occurring at the same time, where teachers and students interact at the same time, or not interacting at the same time, that is either online or offline. So for ICT, it refers to all technological tools that are currently available, that will be available in the future, as you know that these tools are developing rapidly. And we have computer-based technologies such as desktops, laptops, tablets, smartphones, and software programs, internet-based technologies, including emails, websites, social networking sites, etc., etc. So this is a definition by Davis and Hill. So for the types of distance education, by the way, there is also the term attitude, which refers to behavior, feelings towards something. And for the types of distance education, we have some platforms. So we have websites, and we have for educational websites like MOOCs and Moodle. MOOCs referring to massive open online courses, and modular object-oriented learning platforms. These are 2 platforms adopted by Moroccan universities. We have MEN website, which is adopted by the Ministry of Higher Education. That refers to Moroccan Digital University, powered by edX. And we have institutional emails or academic emails given to students that end with ac.ma. We have TV channels like Riyadiyat, Thaqafiyya, etc. And we have radio channels, local radio channels especially. And even some social media websites and software programs like Zoom, like Teams, Microsoft Teams. These are frequently used by students and teachers alike, and even WhatsApp, as we are going to see. So for the procedures of distance education during the quarantine, in fact, before quarantine, there was a protective protocol for students to wash their hands, etc., etc., while they still learn at university. But mid of March, Moroccan universities switched to distance education, the so-called protective protocols, and to curb the spread of the virus. Since then, and especially from March to September, students keep learning online, and in September, examination proximity centers were adopted and deployed for students to take the exams in centers that are near them, because they live away from the university. And even some universities like in Casablanca, where COVID cases are frequent, we have online assessments in some universities. and some minimize classroom sizes with protective measures. This has been adopted at the secondary level, and even it will be adopted in post-secondary level as well, where students, when the size of the classroom is minimized into half, and students follow protective protocol by wearing masks, etc. So, for the previous studies, so we have Fiha Khair 2018, who studied mobile assisted language learning in Algeria. And we have Nasis and Abu Shadid in Lebanon, who studied the attitudes of teachers and administrators towards distance education. And you can see here 2000. We have Bado and Narko 2006 in Ghana, who studied distance education in terms of accessibility and autonomy of students. By the way, for Abu Shadid in Lebanon, they found that both teachers and administrators do not have enough knowledge about distance education, and they have more or less conflicting attitudes. For Goller et al., they studied distance education in Turkey, the attitudes of students or college students towards distance education, and they conducted a t-test to see whether there is a statistically significant difference between male and females towards, in terms of attitudes towards distance education. They found that there is a statistically significant difference. For Dracy and Young in Morocco, they analyzed the reports by Morocco World News on which the state of emergency was declared, and the notifications of some ministries like the Ministry of Education were published and translated into English. So for the research methodology, so the current study uses triangulation of the following methods: questionnaires with 100 English department students and focus groups with 10 English department students. For the research hypothesis, the study has two hypotheses, or in fact just one hypothesis here. So we have Moroccan English departments at Moulay Ismail University have positive attitudes towards distance education in Morocco. For the research questions, as to the quantitative research questions, they are stated as follows: what platforms do students use for distance education during COVID-19 in Morocco? What are the attitudes of Moroccan English department students towards distance education? How do students evaluate distance education during the second semester of the school year, etc. So for the research sampling, it was a voluntary sampling for the questionnaire and snowball sampling for the focus group. And the survey sample demographics is as follows. So for gender, we have 69 females. For age, we have more students from 21 to 23. For educational levels, we have more junior or senior students, that is, students studying the last year. And for the area or the locality, we have more urban than rural students. So we should take this information into account in interpreting the data. So for surveys, focus groups, so surveys were online. I just designed the survey pilot, tested with some students, and put it on Google Forms and published it on some WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups. For the focus group, we have adopted the snowball sampling by asking students to invite their peers to participate in a focus group on WhatsApp, and the link was shared with them, and that was on a voluntary basis as well. So for the data analysis procedures, so SPSS, this is statistical package for social sciences version 23 was used, and descriptive statistics, especially frequencies, were adapted. In vivo version 11 was used as a software for analyzing the data, and thematic analysis of the focus groups was also adapted. So for the research limitations, in fact, as you can see, the use of convenience in snowball sampling can make this study not generalizable to the whole population. However, the large-scale survey by the Ministry of Education showed close results that Moroccan students prefer face-to-face education over distance education, because these are official figures from the Ministry of Education that showed 80% reported that they would like face-to-face education rather than distance education. So for the findings, so as you can see, the frequency of having connection, the majority of students say always have connection, they always have connection. And for the types of connection, and we can see that the majority of students have Wi-Fi connection and mobile connection by 40 students. This is because it should be understood in terms of the voluntary sampling procedure that has been taken. And for the frequently used gadgets, we have laptop, mobile phones. So the bigger the size of the word, the more frequent it is, as this is a word cloud analyzed by NVivo. So mobile phones and laptops are most frequently used. For the attitudes towards distance education, as you can see from this table, we have statements and we have Likert scale from strongly agree to, or strongly disagree 1 to strongly agree 5. And the more, the bigger the number, the more students agree with the statement. So I need technical assistance 3. This means that majority of students are neutral. I prefer technology to real classes 2, which means that the majority of students disagree with the preference of technology to or over real classes. I'm satisfied with my teacher's online performance. This is 2.75. This is a rather low score, and which means that students are not satisfied with their the performance of their teachers, more or less neutral. And I get distracted with learning online because students may not focus. So we have 3. This is more neutral to with regards to students. So these are this table summarizes that this is the most important question. I prefer technology to real classes. The majority of students disagree with this, which means that students have negative preference of ICT over real classrooms or face-to-face education. For the world class on frequent software, so we have PDF as the most used software. We have Google, we have Word, Dictionary, and WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is the first, Facebook, etc., etc. So Classroom, Google Classroom, Zoom, Microsoft, etc. So these are all platforms that support education. So for the access to the academic email, these emails are given by the university and they are necessary to access some platforms like MOOCs and Moodle. So as you can see here, the majority of students said that they do not have access to academic emails, which means that universities should work harder towards marketing this strategy and making students aware of the importance of emails. For the positive attitudes, we have some categories. The ICT or distance education is necessary. One respondent said that my attitude towards ICT is that it is necessary in this circumstances to protect people, students, and professors. So this is in line with the protective protocol. So for good for students who live away from the university, we have respondent 10 who said none of anything suffer more with face-to-face classes than online classes. I live exactly 1 kilometer away from my university, approximately 5 miles. Taking public transportation, especially buses, is not the best, not to mention that it is a waste of both money and energy when sometimes professors fail to warn us of their absence. For the negative attitudes, we have lack of or smart teacher involvement. Like respondent 3 who said that I do not agree because they have to clarify lessons whether with recorded videos or video calls, and we have lack of supervision or orientation. Respondent 4 said because we don't get enough information and we find many difficulties to understand the lessons we got from university professors. So this means that students need more supervision and orientation even though they learn online. For the preparation of materials, these are some recommendations by students. So respondent 4 referring to teachers said that they should do a lot of explaining of lessons and making videos. Materials and internet, he said that one of the respondents said give and supply free internet to the majority of students along with teachers, need to provide and grant more explanations with massive examples for better understanding, however supply much time for the preparation for the exams by listening and limiting the lessons. So these are a lot of suggestions and recommendations by students. So other recommendations we have working on previous exams, organizing materials or platforms, on platforms, etc. So some students were observed to do like focus, like groups, small groups to revise their lessons on Zoom, etc. So as you can see, part-time students have positive attitudes towards distance education, whereas other types of students do not have this positive attitude towards distance education, just from the statements, as you can see. Although the number of part-time students is low. For the Ministry of National Education, this study is in line with the finding of the Ministry of National Education that reported that 80% of students have chosen face-to-face education rather than distance education. This proves the low popularity according to distance education from pre-primary schools to high schools. And distance education is not well accepted by Moroccans, especially at these times. This justifies why some lessons have been omitted from the examinations, especially the lessons that took place online. This proves the relatively, we can say, the failure of distance education in Morocco. So this is the bibliography. This is all, I think. If you have questions, do not hesitate to post them below.